President Trump says the US and Iran have held talks on ending the war in the Middle East as he delays strikes on Iran's energy sites.
And so we're giving it 5 days, and then we're going to see where that takes us. And I would say at the end of this period, I think it could very well end up being a very good deal.
Iran sent conflicting signals on ceasefire talks, denying direct negotiations with the US, but confirming talks with mediators are underway. Stock markets rally and oil plunges after President Trump suggests the Strait of Hormuz could soon reopen if talks with Iran succeed. That's coming up on Business Today.
Another night of explosions in the Middle East. The White House says the situation is fluid after Iran denied President Trump's claim that talks were underway about ending the war.
Meanwhile, here in the UK, the Chancellor will set out principles about who might and might not get support with the cost of living because of the war. Let's look at the Tuesday morning papers, shall we? Starting today with the Mail. The front page is dominated by President Trump's latest comments on the Iran war. Trump blinks first is the Mail's headline after the US president announced a 5-day pause on energy strikes following alleged talks with Iran. I say alleged because Mr. Trump claims Tehran is close to agreeing to no more wars. But Iran denies that any talks have happened. It's a confusing picture this morning, isn't it?
So let's see what The Independent make of it. Donald Trump's claims of so-called productive talks leading The Independent there. The paper reporting that the president's war on Iran was thrown into confusion after he paused his bombing campaign following negotiations. Tehran, as we said, has rejected this as fake news.
What's the take on the Financial Times? They're reporting that Mr. Trump played up the prospect of a diplomatic end to the war, which, when he made those comments yesterday, stocks and bonds rebounded and oil prices suddenly fell. The paper says it comes as the White House faces growing pressure to end the conflict. But are we any closer to an end? Let's see.
Well, it's not over. That's the Daily Mirror's headline. As Sir Keir Starmer warned, the impact of the war could go on for some time, despite Donald Trump's claim that an end to hostilities is near.
Tonight at 6, the Chancellor says there'll be help for those who need it most if energy bills surge because of the war with Iran. Iran and Israel continue to launch attacks despite talk of peace negotiations. Oil prices rise again. The impact of war is already being felt here at the petrol pump and in the fields.
The fuel difference is making about between 500 or 600 pound a day difference to us. That's per day.
I don't want to say in advance, but they've agreed they will never have a nuclear weapon. They've agreed to that.
Israel and Iran continue to strike each other. Tehran says its energy infrastructure has come under attack, while multiple waves of missiles have caused damage and injuries in Tel Aviv. President Trump's new pick for Homeland Security Secretary has been sworn in.
On the programme tonight, 4 replacement ambulances arrive in Golders Green at the Jewish charity targeted in an arson attack which destroyed their vehicles.
We need to move on and continue the service that we provide. We have dedicated volunteers whose sole purpose in life, when they give up time from their families and work, is to save lives.
Well, despite all the talk of a possible end to the war, there has been no let-up in the fighting. There have been more strikes across Iran, with explosions heard overnight in Tehran. Both the US and Israel say they continued to strike regime targets and infrastructure. Iran has fired back. In the Gulf, Bahrain was struck. More than a dozen people have been injured. And the UAE confirmed that a Moroccan contractor with the Emirati military was killed in the attack. In Israel, a missile got through the country's air defences and hit Tel Aviv, injuring several people and damaging buildings and cars. And in Lebanon, Israel has continued to launch strikes across the country, including in the south of Lebanon. Our international editor, Jeremy Bowen, has been looking at possible peace talks and what chance they have of success.
Iran cannot match the military power of the United States and Israel. In Tehran, rescue workers from the Red Crescent are at full stretch. The Americans and Israelis can fly virtually unopposed over Iran to drop their bombs, but this war, like all wars, is not just about raw power. This was after an Iranian strike on Bahrain. Iran's strategy of widening the war, hitting US allies, creating a war of attrition, is making the most of the missiles and drones it has left. It is still hitting back. The Iranian regime has not collapsed or made concessions. Its surviving leaders calculate they can take more pain than Donald Trump. They've thwarted his assumption that US and Israeli power would guarantee a quick, devastating victory leading to the fall of the regime. The focus is now the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow exit from the Gulf. Iran has effectively blocked it, cutting off 20% of the world's oil and gas supplies. Donald Trump threatened to destroy Iran's power grid if it wasn't opened, and now he says they're all talking. There's speculation the US vice president and the president's envoy could even meet the Iranian foreign minister and parliamentary speaker. Other countries are trying to mediate, but analysts point out that neither side is showing signs of making concessions.
I think it's very important to understand that although there might be a lot of hype about diplomacy, about high-level meetings, because the Iranians agreed to a ceasefire last year, which had no terms, and was based on just President Trump pulling the plug and reining in Israel, they're not going to do the same thing again, because there's absolutely no trust towards the Trump administration. The belief is that the US and Israel would only use this time to rearm themselves and go back in to finish the job against the Iranian regime.
BBC Persian has talked to Iranians who are just as skeptical.
I don't think that they will negotiate. The Islamic Republic is very much in place right now. If you want to look logically at it, nor them nor the US have reached what they wanted. The ideology of the Islamic Republic is there. Even if war stops, it will start again at some point.
Trump is buying time for himself to take the war to another phase, maybe a ground attack. I don't think that he's going to make a deal with them.
This is the USS Tripoli, carrying the first of 2 US Marine Expeditionary Units heading for the Gulf. The Tripoli, coming from Japan, is getting closer. Another of these small but powerful amphibious forces, backed by their own helicopters and strike aircraft, has a long passage ahead from California. Without a deal, the war looks to be escalating.
The United States is now getting closer and closer to the prospect of putting boots on the ground. The president seems to have absolute belief in the ability of US military to deliver results, and he believes that taking over Iranian territory would force the Iranians to open up the Strait of Hormuz.
Even if there was a ceasefire or an agreement tomorrow, what has this done to the region?
This is an absolute catastrophe for the region, and it might come to haunt the US and Israel for years to come.
This was Tyre in South Lebanon. An Israeli offensive against Iran's ally, Hezbollah, is intensifying. Israel has no desire to stop, believing it can finish off its most bitter enemy, Iran's Islamic Republic. And for all America's firepower, its president went to war without a defined objective, a clear exit strategy, and a plan for what happens next. Strategic confusion that Iran's regime is using not just to survive, but to try to dictate the way this war ends. Jeremy Bowen, BBC News.
Well, let's go to Washington now. Our chief North America correspondent, Gary O'Donoghue, is there. And we're seeing reports tonight, Gary, that thousands of American troops could be about to be sent to the Middle East.
Yes, there are reports in the US media, pretty widespread now, that a combat brigade from the 82nd Airborne, the iconic 82nd Airborne paratroop regiment here, might be sent to the Middle East. They're on pretty short strings, as it were. They can be deployed at a couple of days' notice. It would be about 3,000 troops altogether, and they're experts in kind of landing in hostile environments, securing runways, that kind of thing. And this is in addition to what Jeremy mentioned there in his report about the 2 Marine Expeditionary Units. They total about 5,000 Marines. Having said all that, Donald Trump said last week, and he's speaking now in the Oval Office, so we're hoping to hear whether or not he is planning to do this. But he said as recently as last week, I'm not sending troops anywhere. That's clearly not true because the Marines were already on their way. But this would mark a significant escalation. But it would give him options. It would give him options in terms of trying to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. It might give him options in terms of potentially occupying Iran's Karg Island, its energy centre where all its exports go from, even potentially securing some spots inside the country itself. And there's been speculation about trying to recover that enriched uranium. All those are opened up by the sending of these troops, but so far, no word from the Pentagon or the White House on whether it's actually happening.
Gary, thank you.
Well, tonight, President Trump has said the US is in negotiations with Iran about the end of the war, but today the fighting showed no sign of letting up. Israeli airstrikes continue to hit Iran, while Iranian missiles and drones continue to target Tel Aviv. Iran's top military command said its armed forces would fight until complete victory was achieved. Meanwhile, Israel said it will continue its military operations in southern Lebanon with full force as it seeks to destroy the militant group Hezbollah, an Iranian ally. From Beirut, our international editor Emma Murphy has the latest.
There is talk about talks, but the reality is war, which continues without pause. This footage of the Iranian Red Crescent retrieving a father and his child from the ruins of their home in Tehran. What is paused for now? American strikes on Iran's energy infrastructure. But it is still striking locations across the country, along with ally Israel. The death toll in Iran is now estimated to be around 1,500. Iranian state TV today continues to publicise Iran's denial of any talks or plans for talks, despite President Trump's claims otherwise. The other claim that has been repeatedly made by Israel and America is that Iran's military capability is so degraded as to be destroyed. This strike on Tel Aviv would suggest otherwise. A further attack from Hezbollah across the border in Lebanon led to the death of a woman in northern Israel. The death toll across Israel now stands at around 20 people. And here in Lebanon, the continuing sight and sounds of Israeli strikes. This on the southern city of Tyre. Israel is seeking to take control of miles of land in the south up to the Litani River. As such, every bridge has now been blown up to prevent advances by Hezbollah. From here, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese have fled north. It's not hard to see why. Israel also continues to strike around Beirut itself, claiming to be targeting those associated with Hezbollah. Every strike a reminder of how fragile safety is across this region. Emma Murphy, ITV News, Lebanon.
OK, well, let's get the latest now from our correspondent Robert Moore in Washington, where Donald Trump has been speaking at the White House in the last few minutes. So, Robert, what has the president said then tonight?
Well, we remain in a world of sort of stunningly mixed signals. The Pentagon this afternoon is expected to announce the deployment of up to 3,000 troops from the 82nd Airborne Division. They would supplement a Marine Expeditionary Force that's already sort of in Gulf waters. All of that would hint at ground operations, potentially the seizing of Karg Island. But at the same time, as you say, we've had the president speaking just in the last few minutes, suggesting both military success and what he called significant diplomatic opportunity.
We have no Navy left. They have no Air Force left. They have no anti-aircraft equipment left, no radar left, no leaders left. The leaders are all gone. Nobody knows who to talk to. But we're actually talking to the right people, and they want to make a deal so badly. You have no idea how badly they want to make a deal.
And he went on to say, look, not only are they talking sense to this sort of unnamed Iranian faction, but those individuals in Tehran have agreed never to acquire a nuclear weapon. The reality, of course, may be very different, and the Trump White House is coming to terms with that. There's no suggestion at this stage of regime collapse, of a popular uprising. Oil prices are now back up to in excess of $100 a barrel, and hardline figures in Tehran appear to be consolidating power. So, you know, there is the risk, and critics will say this in this town, that of a military quagmire, the very eventuality that, of course, the president promised to his voters to avoid at all cost.
Here, 4 replacement ambulances have arrived at the Jewish-led emergency service to replace those which were targeted in yesterday's arson attack in North London. The head of the charity described it as the darkest day in its nearly 50-year history. The Metropolitan Police says it is investigating whether an Islamist group with possible Iranian state links is behind the attack. Here's our special correspondent, Lucy Manning.
The violence of the fire and the explosions now clear as the police cordon was lifted. In the synagogue car park, twisted metal, burnt medical equipment, the charred remains of ambulances, an acrid smell of burning. Oxygen cylinders and glass strewn on the ground. 4 floors of flats with windows blown out. New footage shows the ferocity of the fire. The strength of the explosions show just how lucky those living next door were to escape, as police now investigate possible Iranian links to the attack, with an Iran-aligned group claiming it was behind it.
We know that online they have laid claim to a number of incidents across Europe, and so it's obviously very important for us to understand what is behind the attack in Golders Green and what the motivation of those individuals was.
We were shown inside the synagogue.
This is where the blast was, this is where the heat was. The fact that that hasn't smashed through, there are cracks in that window and this one here. And the fire door is where the fire penetrated the shul. I'm going to join the righteous and call it a miracle. How's that sound?
But they are fearful here, given the possibility this was an Iran-linked attack.
This was planned. All indications are of what we've been told. There was definitely surveillance. And all indications are that we need to be aware that there is surveillance on our communities and on our infrastructure. Absolutely.
The Metropolitan Police Commissioner has warned of the rapid growth of Iranian state threats. He says the Jewish community is now facing a volatile mix where it's increasingly targeted by individuals, groups and states, bringing hate and fear.
4 replacement ambulances were handed over to Hatzolah by the NHS for the Jewish volunteers to help those of any faith and none.
Who would ever dream that ambulances, whose sole purpose is to provide emergency care and save lives, should be the target of this heinous attack?
3 suspects are still being hunted as police try to ascertain if Iran was behind the attack. Lucy Manning, BBC News.